The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome to the show. I have to get right into Republican National Convention stuff because there's so much of it to talk about. I was thinking that one of the least desirable outcomes of this Hurricane Isaac, timing situation with the Republican National Convention would be having to go to that split screen, turning on CNN. Of course, Fox News wouldn't do it, but turning on CNN and seeing that split screen where on one side you have the proceedings at the convention, and on the other side of the screen you've got the hurricane and just rain and all of the stuff that comes with the hurricane. Because at some point, I think that if it's sunny next week at the Democratic National Convention, and people think back and they associate in their minds that terrible, terrible weather going alongside the Republican National Convention, that it's going to have some kind of effect on voters, I think. I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy to think that.
I mean, maybe, but whether or not that would actually affect how they vote, I doubt it.
Well, it's one of these things where is anyone even really going to remember anything that was said in the speeches? People just come away with a sense of what took place.
Certain highlights.
Exactly, and I feel like if that sense has terrible weather and state of emergency, it'll be somewhat negative, don't you think, Natan?
Yeah, I mean, the way I feel when I see hurricane coverage is pretty much the same way I feel when I see Chris Christie give a speech. So I wouldn't doubt that the American people would make
a natural disaster.
It was. We'll get to that. By the way, there was this theme that the Republicans said was going to kind of permeate the convention, and they revealed it yesterday, and it's "we built it." Of course, a reference to an out-of-context line put together by eliminating a lot of what Barack Obama said during a speech to create a completely alternate narrative to what he was actually saying. Remember that? Well, they're turning this into basically the theme of the Republican National Convention. We built it. Government didn't help. Politicians didn't help. We built it, right? Now, of course, they're doing this inside a Tampa stadium that was built with government money. So I guess they didn't even really build that stadium, and they wouldn't have that place to do the convention if it weren't for government financing. But that's okay. That's okay, Louis, right? I mean, we're used to these double standards.
Yes, but what did maybe it means something else.
I don't know.
Maybe they built. I don't know.
They built an incredibly irrational way of going about politics. I don't know. The Tampa Bay Times Forum Arena, which is the site of the Republican National Convention, was built in 1996. It cost $139 million. Most of that cost, $86 million, was financed by public money. Don't fall for the BS, ladies and gentlemen.
But it created jobs, David.
Right, but that's what they say the government can't do.
Smaller government.
Tell that to all the people that are now working in and around the Republican National Convention area. Stadium built by government money and jobs created. Incredible. But we've got to get rid of all that stuff, and instead we need stuff like, for example, when Mitt Romney had those Olympic flag pins produced. That created jobs in China where they were produced.
Hey, jobs are jobs. Whether we're in China or America,
is that
our economy is completely dependent on the Chinese economy. So what difference does it make?
Is that what you're going with now?
Yeah.
Chaos on the GOP convention floor. There's this incident I'm going to play audio and video for you of. Initially, people thought that the crowd was booing a Puerto Rican woman that was speaking, which would have been perfectly reasonable to assume, don't you think, Louis?
At the RNC, yes.
It turns out, though, that they were actually just chanting USA, USA, and that they were angry over some kind of controversy regarding electoral votes. This is a shouting match that erupted between the Ron Paul supporters and the Mitt Romney supporters as the convention was kind of getting going, and there were some votes happening on rules and credentials and the recognition of delegates. People didn't like it. Now, the timing was unfortunate because it did seem like people were just shouting down a Puerto Rican speaker, which is really unfortunate given the stereotypes that the Republican National Convention already doesn't really care about minorities and doesn't really cater to them. And as you can see, with the exception of a handful of people like that female African-American Republican mayor from Utah, I believe it was, you don't really see that many minorities, which is probably the reason why they put front and center the elected officials from Puerto Rico and their wives, so on and so forth. But that being said, let's take a look at some of the video here and the audio. Let's soak in some of the flavor and the color, Louis, of the Republican National Convention. People in cowboy hats yelling with a Puerto Rican woman on the stage. Oh boy. All right, and eventually Reince, however you like to pronounce it, Priebus jumped in and said, you know, this woman has to be allowed to speak. So I understand seat them now. That's the seat them now chant makes sense if this is about Ron Paul delegates. But why USA? I mean, shouting USA and booing when there's a Puerto Rican woman on stage, one of the few Hispanic speakers at the convention, doesn't sound good. It just doesn't sound good. It also makes it seem like you don't realize Puerto Rico is part of the U.S. But admittedly, giving the benefit of the doubt, it seems that USA chant was also related to the Ron Paul delegates in some way.
Yeah, very, very bad timing, but we can't expect the people on the floor of the RNC to understand that.
Back at Netroots Nation, I was interviewed by David Schuster. And David Schuster doing some great coverage at the Republican National Convention, and he tweeted that a GOP attendee was thrown out of the convention because they were throwing nuts at an African-American CNN camera woman and yelling, "This is how we feed animals." Black woman with a camera, GOP attendee throwing nuts at them, saying, "This is how we feed animals." CNN is not confirming the specific details of this, but they are saying there was an incident, and the incident was handled. It involved one of our employees inside the Tampa Bay Times Forum. There's no racism at all inside that Republican National Convention, Louis.
This could only happen at the RNC. This would never happen at the DNC, and if it did, it would be by a GOP attendee at the DNC.
What do you think of that, Natan? Do you agree, or is that just an unfair stereotype? There's of course racism in every aspect of American culture, and that includes some Democrats, but that's a different question of whether this kind of institutionalized racism is part of the platform.
Yeah, this is a tough call, but I think I agree with Louis on this.
Oh boy.
This could happen a billion times. Every time, and you could not tell me, and you wouldn't have to tell me at which convention it happened at. Every time I would guess RNC, every time I would be right.
Most of the times you would be right.
Billion times. How do you like those odds?
Billion times you would be right. I don't know. 999. I have no idea. You know, it's not clear also whether the culprit was a delegate, whether they were attending the Republican National Convention in some other capacity. We just don't know. But the bottom line is, black CNN camera woman pelted with nuts and told, "This is how we feed animals." Very, very nice. Okay, let's get into some of the speeches. Number one, Nikki Haley, South Carolina governor, Republican, of course. Number one, she seemed kind of drunk to me. The way she was delivering her lines was very, very odd. And I actually think that it's not that uncommon if someone is making such a big speech that they might take some Xanax or some Ativan or something like that to kind of ease the nerves. But she really appeared to me in the way that she was speaking to be slurring, and it was a very strange delivery, which I cross-checked with other interviews of her, and it's not always the way she talks. So I don't know what was up.
Are we going to listen to it?
No, we're not. It's a completely worthless speech, so we're not going to play any of it.
Okay. Well, I would have liked to heard an example of some of the slurring. But
we do have an example, though, of what she was wearing, which a lot of people were saying. In part of her speech, one thing she did say was that
chainmail?
She supports the manufacturing industry, which is alive and well, and she's in South Carolina. And the way that she's supporting the manufacturing industry is by wearing an outfit made of metal.
Yeah, it's by wearing a manhole cover around your neck.
She decided, you know, since we have the Boeing situation, Boeing planes, but at least some components being produced in my home state of South Carolina, I'll wear an outfit made from the same metal that the planes are made of, just to kind of show her support. Pretty nice.
Yeah. Looks like it weighs 40 pounds.
Then Ann Romney. Okay, now Ann Romney was supposed to humanize Mitt Romney. If you're waiting until 6 weeks before the election to humanize the candidate, you're probably in trouble. That being said, she did this whole speech. How did the speech start? This is how the speech started. Take a listen.
I want to talk to you tonight, not about politics and not about party. And while there are many important issues we'll hear discussed in this convention and throughout this campaign, tonight, I want to talk to you from my heart about our hearts.
Okay, and people clearly yelling, "We love you, Anne." So then she went on, even though she said this wasn't going to be a speech about party, it wasn't going to be a speech about politics. She did a speech that alluded exclusively to partisan politics in the context of the two major political parties. So a little bit of doublespeak going on with Ann Romney, and it went throughout. I took a bunch of notes. I actually did an instant fact check and kind of instant what you need to know video last night on this. She says, Mitt loves this country. Yeah, but he keeps the money he made from outsourcing jobs to China in Switzerland and the Cayman Islands. What's the deal with that, Lewis?
I don't know. I guess you just have to do that to prove that this country can take care of itself.
Right. This country doesn't need Mitt Romney's money. He loves the country so much, he wants it to be clear how great the country is without any of his money in it.
Because if he were to invest everything he had in the country, our financial woes would be over.
He's Ann Romney also saying, you know, women do have to work a little bit harder than men. Well, then why doesn't your husband think that they should earn just as much money, right? Mitt Romney not supporting the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act. Then this is where it really got bad. Ann Romney talking about when they were in college saying, we were poor. Oh, we were poor, we were poor, we were poor. Until Mitt Romney traded in those stocks that he had just a little bit at a time so that they could live without having to work. That was hard work, Lewis. You have to go down, and there wasn't online trading at that point. You've got to meet with the stockbroker or maybe make a phone call, maybe fax something, and you've got to you've got to arrange for the sale of a little bit of those stocks. That's tough work. Not everybody can do that and balance going to school at the same time.
Sounds impossible to me. I mean, I don't know how they managed.
It's amazing that she was able to do that. And then Mitt also makes me laugh, Ann Romney said. Yeah, like when he joked about the president being a foreigner the other day in Michigan, like the only joke he's ever told in his life, appeasing the most extreme fringes of the Republican Party. He still makes her laugh. That's nice.
You know, George Bush made me laugh a lot, right?
Yeah.
He did a lot of things that were funny. Sometimes he even made jokes that were funny.
Yeah. Didn't mean he was president.
Nothing Mitt Romney does, intentionally or unintentionally, has made me laugh.
Ann Romney at one point also said, it's clear that Mitt's been sex. I didn't know what that meant. It was just a little bit of a verbal slip, but funny nonetheless.
She said that?
Yeah. And then Ann Romney said, what else other than that theme? He built it. He built it. Yeah, he built it on the backs of Chinese labor, which gave Bain Capital more profits, on the backs of Americans losing their jobs, which added to Bain Capital profits, and on the interest earned from his money in foreign banks. Did a hell of a job building it, didn't he?
He built an empire.
And lastly, she said, Mitt is the man America needs. You can trust Mitt. Yeah, you can trust him to kill jobs, to destroy women's rights, the stock market, which we know does far worse under Republicans than Democrats, common sense, logic, decency, and any sense of reason, all would die under a Mitt Romney presidency. So in a sense, Ann Romney was right.
Can you trust a guy who has to go by his middle name?
That's not fair. A lot of people go by their middle names.
Yeah, but come on, you're running for president. You're not even using your first name. How many times has that happened in history?
W. Mitt Romney?
Let's look that up.
Now, I seem to remember that Dwight Eisenhower was like actually David Eisenhower, but I may be wrong. So he might have used his middle name.
I thought it was Dwight David Eisenhower.
Dwight D.
It might be David Dwight in reality, though. I can't remember now.
It might have been colloquially reversed.
Right.
Okay. All right. And then lastly, we had Chris Christie. Okay, Chris Christie barely mentioned Mitt Romney. Well, there's not even anything to comment on. And it's funny, Chris Christie saying for him it's all about being respected, not being loved, whereas Ann Romney said it's all about love. Let's listen to a little bit of Chris Christie's speech here.
In recent years, we as a country have too often chosen the same path. It's been easy for our leaders to say, not us, not now, in taking on the really tough issues. And unfortunately, we've stood silently by and let them get away with it. But tonight, I say enough. Tonight, I say together, let's make a much different choice. Tonight, we are speaking up for ourselves and stepping up. Tonight, we're beginning to do what is right and what is necessary to make America great again.
Okay, which apparently means, what? What are you going to do to make America great again? Elect Mitt Romney, the guy who has done so much to add to the bottom line of China and Switzerland and the Cayman Islands? I guess that's how we're going to make America great, Lewis.
Sounds like a great plan.
Hey, I'm wondering one thing. What's with the weird, like, grade school blue background for, like, the class portraits? You see how they had that for every speaker?
Shouldn't it be a red background?
There were different backgrounds for different speakers, but visually, I think it's an interesting choice. Yeah, why wouldn't it be red? Maybe it just doesn't play well on camera. I don't know.
Maybe there should have been like a Jersey Shore background for Chris Christie.
The last question I hope somebody asks Mitt Romney at this point, which would be very telling, would be, Mitt, would you rather take over the current economy or the one that President Obama took over? That's a bet to quote Mitt Romney, I might bet $10,000 that any reasonable person would prefer to take over this economy than the one that Barack Obama took over, which should really tell us something about all of these claims from the Republican side about how bad the economy is.
You can also count on Mitt deflecting that question like a champ.
Right.
Yeah.
He would prefer to inherit this economy, the previous one, none at all, and all economies from recent history. But he's not going to take a position on that because that would be...
Perhaps he'd pick the Chinese economy.
Yeah, he'd rather do the Chinese economy if Bain Capital had its way. Okay, let's take a break. A lot more to talk about when we get back. Get the bonus show, davidpakman.com/membership. We're streaming live on YouTube. Hi to everyone from the We Survived Bush, You Will Survive Obama page. Check them out on Facebook. Stay tuned. Back after this.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Joining me is Richard Esco from Campaign for America's Future, also Social Security Works. Richard, great as always to talk to you. Let's start with Joe Biden's recent comments about Social Security, which are a big deal, but because of all the other political news that's been going on, they've been largely ignored, at least in great detail, by most of the mainstream media. What did Joe Biden say, first of all?
Oh, well, I'm wearing my glasses in order to quote it accurately, even though I've been told they make me look like Seinfeld's dad. But anyway, what he said was, and this was about a little more than a week ago, close to 2 weeks now, he was doing a meet and greet at a coffee shop, the Coffee Break Cafe in Stewart, Virginia, and somebody brought up Social Security or something, and here's what he said verbatim, and verbatim is kind of important in this case. He said, you know how Biden is. You can picture it. Hey, by the way, let's talk about Social Security. Hey, by the way, let's talk about Social Security. Number one, he said, I guarantee you, flat guarantee you, that there will be no changes in Social Security. This is from a poll report of the reporters with him. And then he said one more time, I flat guarantee you. Now, that's pretty strong stuff from an administration that keeps talking about, bargains that include cuts to Social Security. I flat guarantee, 3 guarantees, 2 of them flat, that there will be no changes to Social Security benefits. That was on, I believe, August 15th or 16th. So since then, nothing but that, to use Biden's own phraseology, I would call that a big effing deal. So
okay, so let's take it piece by piece. Prior to this statement, did we have anything even remotely definitive from the Obama administration about the future of Social Security?
What we had was actually the opposite of definitive. The only thing we had that could even be described as definitive was repeated statements from the president that Social Security should be on the table as part of an overall deficit reduction package, even though Social Security is forbidden by law from contributing to the deficit. So he said many times that there are cuts in one of his phraseologies that he used so small that folks wouldn't even notice them, which isn't true. They would be very noticeable. So a number of times the president has offered to cut Social Security benefits as part of a grand bargain. He appointed a deficit commission whose 2 co-chairs were both on the table as saying that they wanted to see Social Security benefits cut. So for a long time, the president has been angling to put this on the table. He even was planning, according to reports, to put it in his 2011 State of the Union message until citizen pressure forced him to back down. So it's clear that their position has been the opposite of this up to this point, and here comes Joe Biden.
Okay, so now then let's take it since Joe Biden's comments. Have we seen any follow-up from anybody in the Obama administration about what Joe meant? And has anybody even really tried to get an answer about this?
No, and that's the weird part. You know, if you think back, for example, Biden was the first to make a comment about gay marriage, and there was some back and forth about that. People thought maybe Joe had wandered off the reservation, and then a week or two later, the president made his comment about how he had evolved on the issue of gay marriage. Now, in the meantime, he was asked, is Biden speaking for the administration? The press secretary was asked, is Biden speaking for the administration? There's been a bizarre, as far as I know, kind of radio silence about this one. Is Biden speaking for the administration? The administration hasn't elaborated, to my knowledge. No reporter has even asked the president or the press secretary, to my knowledge, what was Joe Biden talking about? So there's been this bizarre, everybody wanted to talk about Biden's chains comments, and the president or press secretary was certainly asked about that. The president responded to it, but nobody has asked about a very substantive question, and that to me is crazy.
Right. Now, you would think that if it were the case that Biden is making some kind of official statement reflecting the actual policy moving forward, that would be a big deal that we would be hearing from the Obama campaign about, because it would be such a significant thing.
Or a big apple, as Joe would say. Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, that's one possibility. Look, there are two or three different possibilities. One is, look, since Biden said that, the president has given an interview to the Associated Press where he once again has said, well, everything should be on the table, including some things the Democrats won't like, presumably or possibly meaning Social Security. So one possibility A, they're talking out of both sides of their mouth here. Possibility B, there's no organization behind this. Possibility C, it was a trial balloon and they're not seeing it as a big issue right now. Nobody responded. Whatever the heck is going on, I think people would be wise to jump on this and say, hey, we think this is a great statement that Biden made. We're all for it. We want to hear it from the president's lips. We want to hear it from every single member of the House that we intend to vote for. We want you to get our vote by saying this, every senator and so on. So I love to see people organizing around this comment.
All right, so we're going to keep an eye on it. Hopefully we will get some kind of an answer soon. We've been speaking with Richard Esco, Campaign for America's Future, Social Security Works. Always great, as always, to talk to you.
Same here. Thanks for having me, David.
Okay, let's take a break. We'll be back with plenty more after this. Stay tuned.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Now let's go to Michael Schur, political correspondent for the Young Turks on Current TV. Michael, let's talk a little bit about yesterday's keynote speeches. I kind of did my instant analysis. I had really the most to say about the Ann Romney speech because that was really about Mitt Romney, whereas the Chris Christie speech was a lot about him getting respect, but I didn't really find him to be talking that much about Mitt Romney. Give me your overview of how you thought the first night of speeches went.
Well, I mean, you know, here's the basic overview. In the hall, it does not feel electric. I asked somebody who I'm working with at Current, who's been to a ton of conventions. It felt to me like this is what the Bob Dole in '96, the Bob Dole convention must have felt like. He said that was even more raucous. I don't know if it was the hangover from the hurricane. I don't know if it was the uncertainty of what's going to happen today, if they were going to suspend. There was talk here of suspending the convention if people needed to go to Hurricane Isaac. I don't know what it was, but there wasn't electricity in the hall. And of course, a lot of people could say, well, it's the candidate. So all these speeches were played to a very sort of somber hall. We heard from people, somebody who I guess is a source inside the planning committee for the convention, that they were told to turn the volume up on all the music, so it was boisterously loud when the music was playing in the hall, just to kind of make it seem more alive. So the speeches themselves, it's not that they fell on deaf ears, but it took a while. The biggest ovation went to Scott Walker when he was introduced. That was topped by Rick Santorum. And to go over the speeches, Rick Santorum's speech, I think, felt like the keynote address to this hall, and Chris Christie's was the keynote to the rest of the country. And that's how they felt. Chris Christie's speech to me was the kickoff of Christie 2016. He had some good singers in there. I thought it was a really professional, well-delivered speech. It is what a keynote speech is going to be. I'm not going to agree with a lot. I think I tweeted that it was a lot of lies, a lot of a lot of misleading in that speech, but it was a professional speech, and that's what I felt. Ann Romney, I don't hear anybody here talking about how this was just a blowaway speech. Do you know anyone, David, who's like talking to a friend and saying, "Oh, I really liked when she said X"? There's nothing that you can cite from anything that was said except Chris Christie's speech. So it was sort of a vanilla, sweet, loving wife speech, and then Romney came out at the end for a really brief interlude with her and with the crowd that, in other years would have gone on much longer. Ovations, come back, don't leave. There was none of that. He was out there for like 11 seconds, then they left.
Yeah, it is strange. The Ann Romney speech, it's funny because I'm surprised. Outside of the convention green zone, so to speak, before the speech, everybody was saying it's going to be incredible, she's going to be wonderful, it's going to turn everything around, she's going to humanize Mitt Romney, which, by the way, if you're waiting till 6 weeks before the election to humanize the guy, you're probably in trouble. But it was almost like written on the wall, because afterwards on TV and on blogs, etc., they were saying exactly that, which is, Mrs. America, it was incredible, so on and so forth. But I'm curious, was that the attitude inside the convention?
It wasn't here. I mean, everybody, of course, everybody inside the convention and the media halls are the ones that are putting that out, making the statement that this is going to soften the candidate, etc. However, what really showed through was that she gave a speech that, while it was really important and they kept adjusting schedules to make sure it got primetime coverage, it didn't do, according to everyone inside the green zone that you described here, which is accurate, that everybody here didn't feel that there was something magical about it. It was sweet, it was above criticism, but it was certainly well below adulation. And I think that was the problem with her speech last night. It will be forgotten in the annals of convention speeches, but I think there are going to be clips and quotes from Chris Christie's speech, not from Ann Romney's speech. And yeah, I mean, she seems like a nice woman, but she didn't create a bond between her husband and America last night.
So much like Newt Gingrich said about Mitt Romney, you don't particularly dislike Ann Romney right now.
Right, I don't particularly. No, I have nothing against Ann Romney. I couldn't care less about the first ladies in general. I really couldn't. I mean, I found Barbara Bush annoying during Katrina, but she was well beyond being the first lady at that point. I really couldn't care less. I feel like, obviously we're going to be curious about them. We're going to interview them. People are going to talk to them. We're going to wonder. We're going to have opinions. Women are going to have opinions about them. I could not care less. But she does seem like a lovely woman. She's a sincere woman. She's been through a lot with breast cancer and MS and raising 5 boys. And she did it with, in a way that not many Americans can do it, but she did it. And so I couldn't care less about that. But if it was her job to say to America that her husband is more than what we know already, then she didn't do that job last night, in my opinion.
All right, Michael Schur, political correspondent for the Young Turks on Current TV. We're going to watch the speeches tonight, and we'll check in with you tomorrow. Thanks as always.
All right, David, thanks.
All right, Louis, what's your thought of the Republican convention so far? I mean, is it moving you? What's your opinion? Is
it moving me? Oh, boy. Well, I don't know. I think they're just, making the best of a bad situation. I mean, not just considering the weather, but their candidate. I mean, Mitt Romney, it just seems like there's not much enthusiasm among a lot of the party leaders, and they're just doing what they can. I mean, that's about it.
All right, let's check in with Luke Vargas in Tampa at the Republican National Convention. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show. Let's check in Tampa at the Republican National Convention, first with Luke Vargas from Talk Radio News Service. Luke, we already talked about the speeches, but you've been telling me there's some kind of interesting backstory. As a result of the 2 first days being compressed into one, there's been some weird timing with some of the different on-stage visuals and things that are going on. Talk to us about that.
Well, the Romney campaign and the RNC officials seem to have done a great job of condensing all the speeches, which is one of the things they had to do after the storm canceled that first day. But I think they may have left out some logical gaps. The first thing that I really noticed yesterday was when the primetime session began, there was a gentleman by the name of Neil Boyd, quite a large guy. He's only 25 years old, and he came out to sing Lee Greenwood's God Bless the USA, which is a very popular tune here. And he was so large, it seemed, that he couldn't even stand, so he had to slump against this stool as he sang the song. And he was followed by Mia Love, who is the mayor of, I believe it's Saratoga Springs, Utah. She's a new darling of the Republican Party. And the footage that was playing behind her on stage was of her running on a treadmill and talking about how much personal health meant to her. And it just seemed to me to be the most ironic thing. And it happened that there was a liberal talk show host next to me who reminded me that, sort of self-depreciation and perception of irony is not really one of the Republican strong suits. And it was evident last night.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess let's play devil's advocate. Maybe the Republicans are just being really open here because they're saying, listen, if you have a weight problem, that's okay. And if you're not able to keep fit, that's okay. But we also understand the importance of, nutrition and fitness, which is also something that they seem to almost be disgusted about when it's Michelle Obama talking about the merits of it.
Of course. Well, you can't have it both ways, but you got to pick one, it seems. But there were flaws like this all throughout the speech last night. The other one you probably talked about, you've got two candidates saying they want to tell love stories, including our new pastor, Ted Cruz in Texas, and then Chris Christie coming out there and saying, I want to be respected more than loved. So this whole first major night of the convention replete with these sort of logical inconsistencies.
Yeah, the funny thing about that is it kind of fits into it's really a microcosm of Mitt Romney, isn't it? On the one hand, he's for this. On the other hand, he's against it. On the other hand, he's not taking a position. And on the other hand, he'll take any position that you like and will get you to vote for him. It's kind of like the focus is love, the focus is respect. It's almost like a microcosm of the Romney flip-flopping.
Sure, no one really sat up out of their seats during maybe they did during the Ann Romney speech, which I wasn't wowed by, at least as much as some of the papers that I'm reading here seem to be. But when Chris Christie started talking, I mean, he spent a long time before he ever talked about Mitt Romney, and most of the beginning of that speech, in my eyes at least, was sort of introducing themes that have not been present at all throughout Mitt Romney's campaign or through what we associate with Mitt Romney, which is that he really does like to be beloved, perhaps, more than he likes to be respected because of the hard-line positions he takes, at least during this campaign.
Has Chris Christie been kind of hanging around there between events or outside of his speeches? Is he seen walking around, or what's he doing?
Yeah, I believe he was seen walking around earlier yesterday as well as sometime on Monday, but I haven't run into him, or I haven't run into him either of those days, but I haven't seen him since the speech, so maybe he's gone off. But his state doesn't have a hurricane alert, so he has no reason to run away.
All right, so tonight we're going to see Paul Ryan is going to kind of wrap up the night. I think actually that there's some kind of religious benediction after Paul Ryan, but he's basically going to be the last major speaker tonight, and then Mitt Romney planned to end the convention tomorrow night. Anything special we should know about tonight when we're watching the Paul Ryan speech?
I don't know too much about the Paul Ryan speech. I've got a little camera set up here which gives me a zoomed-in view of the stage, and Condi Rice just got off the stage. She was doing her 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 mic check, and Marco Rubio just did the same. So some interesting speakers, but I don't really know exactly what we're going to expect from Paul Ryan tonight. We'll see.
All right, so of course I'll be doing instant fact checks, what you need to know, talking points after the speeches, so when you show up at work tomorrow, you're going to know exactly how to counter the right-wing spin on these speeches. We've been checking in with Luke Vargas, Talk Radio News Service. We'll talk to you tomorrow, Luke. Thanks.
Take care.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Support the David Pakman Show free by doing all of your Amazon.com shopping through the black banner at davidpakman.com. Click it, bookmark it, use it every time you shop at Amazon. You can also become a David Pakman Show member, made possible in part by liberalbias.com. Liberalbias.com is the only website allowed at producer Lewis's Krakatoa metal band shows, other than the Krakatoa Facebook page, website, link, URL address, of course.
That's right. Also on YouTube.
Today's David Pakman Show new member of the day, Jose Ochoa Jr. Very glad to have him on board. Of course, membership is the #1 funding source for the David Pakman Show. You can find out more at davidpakman.com/membership. Lewis, how many memberships have you given away to friends and family at this point?
Like 250 million.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
It's almost one per person in the U.S.
Yeah, that's right.
Closing in.
I have a lot of friends and family.
Shocking.
Yeah.
A lot of people wouldn't know that. Rush Limbaugh came up with an idea for Hurricane Isaac, and I'm using the term idea very, very loosely. He says, let's get rid of poor Democrats in Louisiana by building some levees out of money. Here's the audio from his radio program talking about this. Let's take a listen, Lewis.
First thing we do is offer to send 500 bus drivers to New Orleans, paid for by us, to make sure that the buses that were not used by the Democrat mayor during Hurricane Katrina will be used to evacuate people should it become necessary. The second thing that I think the Republicans ought to do is send bags of money instead of sand. Bags full of money to shore up the levees in New Orleans. This would accomplish many things. A, it would show our...
Okay, did we lose the audio there, Lewis?
Yes.
We did. Okay. So there's the Rush Limbaugh's idea. Let's send bags of money to shore up the levees. And what he goes on to say is he talks about how it would, he's very angry that CNN asked the Romney boys what it's like to be so rich. So somehow it would be connected to that in Rush Limbaugh's mind. And then he says the poor of New Orleans will storm the levees and steal the bags, thereby putting themselves at risk for the eventual flooding that will happen once they take the bags of money down. That way Republicans can get rid of even more Democrats in Louisiana and shore up the states for themselves. So again, Rush Limbaugh sometimes says he's a comedian. So like when he says something offensive like this, like for example, where lots of people actually did die because of the levees in Hurricane Katrina, let's get rid of more black Democrats by teasing them with bags of money from the Romney boys because they're so rich, so then they'll end up killing themselves because they're so stupid, they wouldn't realize that if you take the bags down, then the city will flood. When people are offended and they call Rush out on this, like when he said Sandra Fluke is a prostitute, whore, whatever, he says he's a comedian. He's doing comedy. The thing is, he never says anything that's funny. All of his jokes just aren't very funny. He's the least funny comedian I've ever seen.
Yeah, and he's only a comedian when it comes to things that offend people.
It's funny, yeah. He never is a comedian when it comes to things that make people laugh. It's anytime he's offended someone, he was doing comedy.
Yeah.
Of course he was doing comedy.
But there is some validity to what he's saying because personally, I've stopped being offended by anything he says.
You consider it comedy?
Pretty much. I mean, I think we've gotten to the point where, I mean, he says things strictly to offend.
But there's a difference, though, between finding Rush funny and what you are saying, which is you find Rush to be a parody of himself, which is very different than saying I think Rush is hilarious. I love how funny he is.
Yeah. Apparently he thinks he's pretty funny.
He does seem to.
Yeah.
The conspiracy theories about this Hurricane Isaac are quite real. I jokingly talked about how soon are we going to hear comments about God and God's effect on the hurricane and the connection to the Republican National Convention. There was a news report. And it's like, I hate to even use the term news report because it's complete nonsense, but there was something presented as if it were a news report using the format that we're accustomed to seeing news in on Pat Robertson's Christian Broadcasting Network, where they said it was like a report on people who were praying to move the hurricane so that the convention would happen. I mean, this is just so absurd. Let's take a look at this report. Amazing.
But gratitude's been a predominant attitude in Tampa's Christian circles, as it looks like the city will escape much of Isaac's wrath. Reverend Justin Peters is part of an effort to cover the party conventions in prayer, and she says there's been plenty of prayer about Isaac in the last few days.
We have had lots and lots of people praying around the clock that it would move, and if you watch from the very beginning where they were saying it was coming and now where they're saying it's going, then it has really moved out of the way for us. And we appreciate God doing that and moving it for us.
What a life. What a life, ladies and gentlemen. Imagine they're praying round the clock to move the hurricane for the RNC. Imagine being the one who's tasked with the third shift praying. In other words, they're doing it round the clock. Imagine if they come to you and they say, listen, we're moving the hurricane for the RNC through prayer. I know this is kind of annoying, but you've got the midnight to 8 a.m. shift on that. You're going to have to do the prayer during that time slot. What a life. Unbelievable.
You know what? This is incredible. Why don't they just pray 24/7 for the economy to be fixed and for job growth?
We'd be all set. Everything would be fixed by then.
Yeah.
Obviously, though, it does make sense. God is involved in the internal politics and specific weather patterns of one country on one planet in one galaxy in the universe that God created, because he's retired now. not off Social Security, off of the stuff he built. Of course, he built it. God built it.
He built it.
The eternal he built it.
Built everything.
No question about it. All right, let's go to your voicemails.
Built you, David.
219-2-DAVID-P is our voicemail line. It's available for you 24/7. Here's one voicemail that was left for us. Let's listen and respond.
Hi, my name is Ro Parker, and I'm calling from Boise, Idaho. And I wanted to commend you on your use of language, especially when you're talking about black and white people. I find that in our state, it's really hard to call white people white, and some white folks are scared to use the word black, and so they always default to African American, and black folks are not always African American. So I just wanted to, among other things, that I was really, really glad to hear you having discussions like that in the open. I think it's healthy and not racist the way some people tend to see it as like dividing because you're identifying people by their race or ethnicity or whatever. And we really have to move beyond colorblind. And I think this is a really good way to do it. So
okay, so this is a really good point actually that Ro is making here. And we've talked about this before. Natan's talked about it a lot, which is sometimes when you take political correctness to the extreme, you start using terms that are no longer even meaningful. And Ro points out the exact way that that happens. In order to not call black people black, sometimes you use the term African American. Many times you have black people who are not African American, and it's actually just an incorrect term. So this is a great example, and you know the difference when someone is using the term black or white or Jew in a way that is insulting, and when you're just talking about a type of people. You're talking about a
defining
group of
characteristic.
People. You're talking about a defining characteristic, and this is the exact example, don't you think, Natan, of what we were talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, sometimes when you're talking, I mean, realistically, black and white refers to your skin color, not to any societal definition of the word race, ethnicity, nationality.
Geographic origin.
Exactly. So if you're talking about people who have dark skin and calling them black makes perfect sense, I don't see how you can refrain from using that and choose a politically correct term that is more confusing.
Absolutely.
But there's a lot of racial paranoia out there, and because of that, that's what ends up happening.
And there's a lot of real racism out there, too. So understandably, people are sensitive to these things. No question about it.
Well, if the racism wasn't so real and profound, the racial paranoia wouldn't be there either.
I agree with you. On the topic of Fox News outing the Navy SEAL involved in the killing of Osama bin Laden, some people critical that we didn't bleep the individual's name when replaying the Fox report, saying, hey, guess what? You just outed him again, and I'm unsubscribing to your channel for it. If you really cared about this guy and his identity, you wouldn't have kept putting his name out there. So damn Fox News and damn you. Not everyone agrees. Hey, he was outed by a major news corporation. David Pakman and independent media outlets reporting on it is not going to make a difference. Once you're outed, there is no second outing. I tend to agree with that.
I don't know if I like that line of reasoning. I guess if your comment on that story was irrelevant because you're a small-time news provider, then I guess everything you say is irrelevant because you're a small-time news provider.
No, I think what they're saying is that once the name has already been put out there,
I know.
It doesn't matter if I bleep it.
I just mean I don't like the idea that because we're small, we're not influential at all.
I don't know that that's what was being implied, to be honest.
Okay.
Well, I mean, obviously, I'm going to agree with the latter comment here.
All right. Thank you, Louis. And on the anti-gay activist school teacher, now under arrest for molesting many, many young boys, if he is solely into young boys, that makes him a pederast. If it's specifically children of either sex, then he is a pedophile. All right, well, I guess I need to get my definitions better, Louis, don't I?
It's complicated.
Become a member. DavidPakman.com/membership. Big show tomorrow. This is a big show every day, though.
Yeah.
We'll see you tomorrow.
The David Pakman Show at DavidPakman.com.